everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Four Mortal Coils. Audience and fellow Coils alike, welcome back to none other than episode 20, Big 20. It's hard to believe that we've been doing it for this long, but we have. That's 20 weeks, roughly. Add a few on top of that for, non-episode weeks, but that's pretty crazy.
Only 52 weeks in a year, right?
Right. I was literally about to ask. I was like, how many weeks are in a year?
So, I mean, in other words, we've been doing this 6 months.
Yeah.
Five.
Yeah.
I'm not good at math. I leave that to the other people. Anyways, we have a very special episode today. And this is really going to be a opportunity for the audience to leave their comments. I'm very, very much looking forward to hopefully some audience interaction on this one, whether in the short form or the long form content. Today we are talking about protests, which is a bit of an extension on free speech discussion that we've had in the past. But it's going to take a little bit more of a personalized approach, as well as a general sort of overview of protest in general and the lengths to which an individual or group of people may go in protest. The history of some of protests that we are all familiar with, as well as where do we draw the line? How far is too far? Is there a line determined by the subject of the protest, or is there just some more objective line, like just don't ever do violence ever? That's what we're here to talk about. So I'm joined today by Trevor and Steven, respectively. How are you guys doing this fine evening?
I'm doing pretty well. I've been working pretty nonstop these last 8 or so days, so I'm a little burned. But I got some pretty good stories that relate directly to this topic, so I'm pretty excited. Some shit's happened these last 4 days.
Very recently exposed to protest, as I heard. So that'll be interesting to hear from. How about you, Steven?
I mean, people, holidays are always hard, and I know I'm talking to at least one coil out there when I say that. They're just always hard. So that's where I'm at right now. They're just hard.
Yep, sure. So, just gonna dive right into it. I have a bunch of stuff written down here in absolutely no cohesive manner, so we may just jump around a lot, but I really like the idea of this topic because I think it will reveal things about people that may not adhere to our traditional day-to-day concepts of what it means to be a good person, or like what it means to like adhere to laws and things like that. Like we might say that somebody's a good person because they follow the law and they're respectful to other people and they are, nonviolent or something like that. But like I said, I like this topic because it sort of pokes at you like, hey, if things were really going downhill, or if something that you loved and cherished and admired was like seriously at risk, what would you do? We talked before about what you would die for, and that may influence part of this conversation. But, as far as like, that's going to be on the extreme end of the scale, so to speak. But still relevant. And so I think it asks people to consider when would they step outside the bounds of what is sort of generally acceptable to protect or, otherwise tear down something that either threatens them or that they hold dear. So yeah, I guess I'll go around and offer you guys the chance to give your initial thoughts about, have you been part of a protest? What do you think about the topic in general, and then I'll go last, I guess.
Cool. I might go first unless Steven interrupts me, but
no, you're good.
Beautiful. Wow. Welcome everyone to our 20th episode. I love that we made it this far. Beautiful. It's wonderful to see you both of y'all's lovely faces, as well as a continuing audience somehow. The fact that we get even 5 people to watch this thing is a smashing success, and a real development on what the philosophy club that we were all in college was. And that was 8 or so weirdos in a room somewhere just shooting the shit and trying to get this life figured out.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's a real testament to what that was, that anybody shows up to this at all. And I got to say, I'm quite honored that anyone would listen to this at all. So to the topic at hand, the way it's worded, just so I'll reiterate it and just confirm that I understand it correctly. It was, how far are you willing to go to protest? Like, if there was given something or rather, how far would you be willing to push your actions and activities, listener, if something happened? Like, if I raise the stakes higher and higher and higher, is there a maximal limit that you're willing to commit to in defiance of whatever activity is taking place? So we'll probably set up some play examples here as we think aloud about this. We'll probably think of different ways that things can get very, very bad. We'll probably reference a lot of historical moments, whether it be during the 20th century or right now. And we'll explore these various viewpoints and see how far we could stretch our play models and see exactly where we fit within these various worlds that we think of. So to get started, just to bring it right to what I really wanted to talk about for this episode, I was just recently involved, not with a protest, but I was at a protest that I didn't anticipate, and it was kind of
located in the same.
I was located in the general vicinity of a protest.
I was like hanging out, and then like a protest happened, and I was like there, and there were like literally tens of thousands. Well, there were like at least half of 10,000 people. There were like 5,000 something people there as a bare minimum. And a large minority of them started protesting. It was quite insane. So just to build on the story, I won't get into the details of why for the sake of privacy, I suppose. But I was at UC Berkeley at the graduation for the graduating class of 2024. I was there. And while I was there, just let me build the story for you. There's a scene that I have to build that you might encounter it. So the graduating ceremony at a college the size of UC Berkeley is quite enormously large and insane, and like the sheer amount of people. And the way that they had it set up is all of the people that were graduating were on one half of this coliseum that they have set up, their like memorial stadium. And then everybody else was on the opposite side. So like you could watch all the graduating seniors from the other side of the stage. There was nobody sitting in the center of the stadium because there's just that many people. You can't just set out chairs. There wouldn't be enough space comfortably to fit all these people within the actual football field in the center. So just one half, the other half. So the commencement started. It was really quite interesting. This lady came up to the stage. She introduced her pronouns and then some situational stuff here, there about like UC Berkeley. And then shortly after, some strange things started happening. And here's the first thing that happened. Two of the students that came to the stage, like the actual like honors students, the ones that were selected as part of the speakers, the people who actually go up there and are honored, suddenly just stood up, walked up right behind the chancellor, like an assassin, like literally like the guy who killed Abraham Lincoln. Like it was literally like they just walked up behind her, but they didn't. I'm sorry, I don't mean to build the scene like that, but that is sort of, it was kind of weird that they infiltrated that well. And I use these words in a negative connotation. I'm not trying to, and I don't mean to play off what happens next as if they're the bad guys, because I think that's the whole point of this conversation, to explore evil things,
right,
whether in that whole situation. So we'll actually explore like the morality and the ethicality of these things later. But they came up and they just like whipped out this Palestine flag and just held it up behind her, like they were like, you know, trying to rant, like show that she supports Palestine, like the flag directly behind her as she talks to the microphone. And it was very out of nowhere. Didn't expect it. And then all of the sudden, everybody on the opposite side of the stadium, that is to say, all the graduating seniors, well, not everybody, but 1/4 of this massive graduating class suddenly just whipped out Palestine flags and started chanting over their own commencement, like their commencement address, their graduating thing, the thing that they came there to do, something that a lot of them didn't actually get for high school. None of them actually had. A lot of them didn't have a graduation because of COVID and all that kind of thing. A lot of them didn't have one. And all of a sudden, a quarter of this huge mass of people just started chanting, "Viva, Viva Palestine, Viva, Viva." It's like literally, you couldn't hear a word. It just swamped over the place. And all of a sudden, like these, like 6 people popped up and like with the shirts that just said "divest" across it. And it just got huge. And like for a second there, like the chancellor who was speaking didn't know what to do. Nobody really knew what to do. So they started playing "Don't Stop Believin'" by Journey, like over everything, so nobody could hear.
Oh
I
my
swear to God.
Oh my
Summer wind.
God.
Like imagine these two things swirled up into each other. All right. Viva,
all I can see is like some AV
Palestina.
engineer off in the corner. They're like, "We've got to do something," and they're like, "Play something, play anything," and he like grabs some old like cassette tape and
throws it right in there. And he
Just
started playing
whatever came up first is what they agreed on. You know?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, like if something were to like go bananas. So and then like they shout louder, the music is deafeningly loud. Everyone around me, like all the like parents and family members that had come to this thing, like there was a complete and total, I don't know how to feel about this sort of sentiment sweeping over, because nobody wants to say anything because everyone has political opinions and nobody's in the mood to really poke on that. It was just watching like, huh. And like as these students do all this thing, and then they kick them out, like one by one these students start to walk back. I'm almost done with this story, I swear. These students start to walk back, but it does get much crazier. Like some crazy shit happens at the end. So they all go back up, like out of the stage. Like it's a weird thing where it's kind of a bowl that goes in, and then like you walk out of the Coliseum, out of the stage. So they all walked up and out, and all of a sudden they all broke in through the right, like a good 10 minutes later after they were kicked out, and they came back in. And this giant mass of students just massed up in this open area on the right of the Coliseum. And it literally became over a quarter of the overall UC Berkeley graduating class got their shit from where they were standing for their commencement address for their graduation, and then walked over to the Palestine column and joined in and just shouted out their entire own graduation. You couldn't hear it. You couldn't hear the graduation. It was insane. They were just yet shouting over and over and over again, like what was that? There were a few different. They had like 10 different chants that they did, but suffice to say they were quite loud. And then at the very end, when it all ended, and everyone was like, "Okay, it's over." As you walk out, there's only one way to exit that I knew, through the memorial like Coliseum, and as you approach that exit, you go down this winding tunnel. As you go down the exit, you hear like this faint roaring sound, just "Viva, Viva Palestina, from the river to the sea," like all that kind of stuff. And as you turn the corner, there's just mass of like people. I would say about 70 to 80% of it students, but also just people from Berkeley area had amassed right in front of the exit. So as you walk out of there, they would just like be right there looking directly at you. It was like the Rainforest Cafe with the gorillas. They were like right there, and it made me very weirded out. And you just walk through them. That was a weird analogy, but I don't know. That was a weird experience for me as a child, and it kind of brought me to that sentiment for a short moment. And like I walked through it, and I was looking around like, what the absolute, what just happened? And I walk out of there, and then just like that, like literally an hour later, I get a message like on the thing, like for this podcast, like Brave was like, "Hey, here's a topic idea. How far would you be willing to go on protest?" I'm like, what the absolute fuck? What kind of coincidence is that? So yeah, that happened to me recently, and it was really strange. And I for a lot of people, they had felt quite negatively about the whole experience. For a lot of people, and a lot of people felt at the same time that the exact opposite. Like they were quite proud. People around Berkeley around here, they felt like it was akin somewhat to the Vietnam War, and the thing that a lot of the old people around here had done back in the 60s. It was a similar vibe. It's a really hodgepodge of opinions around here as to that event, and it's really quite strange seeing all of it, and you're not quite sure where the narrative goes. after in the future, because it's just so many opinions that are so disparate, and you're not quite sure what the narrative will be when we get there, when we get to 30 years from now. And of course, it's going to change again and again and again. But that's essentially my story. How fucked up is that? Or how wild is that?
It is pretty crazy. I'm glad you got to be a part of that, because
Yeah.
a lot of people don't ever get really the opportunity to I won't say participate, because you technically weren't participating, but at least even be what was it, in the general vicinity of a
In the
mass
geography.
demonstration.
Yeah.
Because and before I let it loose to Steven to kind of give his spiel, it's this is something that I wanted to make clear in this episode, is that I think it's easy for people to forget that the entire country of the United States was pretty much catalyzed by protest and by people being pissed off enough about, at least in this case, British, regime, to quite literally divest from it, start a revolution, and then eventually forge an entirely new independent country. And since then, there have been countless examples of different types of protests. Literally, as we've just been going on, I'm like, oh, there's another one. Oh, there's another one in my head. There's another one. And I write them down. Obviously, we would never have enough time to talk about all of them in an hour and a half or so, but it's something that I think benefits people to at least experience firsthand or be around, because the energy, or just sort of the general vibe, is very particular. Whether you are for or against what's going on, it is free speech at its peak, some might say. But anyways, Steven.
Yeah, so the way that I immediately started thinking about this was, when are you willing to step outside of the bounds of civilization, right? So, Brayton was just talking about how there's all this human, like crowd mentality going on, right? And truly, anything can happen. I mean, anyone should be able to understand what I'm talking about. Like, in a big crowd of people, a lot can happen in a very big hurry. So, I mean, it's kind of like, what situation would get you so mad or so impassioned that you voluntarily exited a little bit of civilization, or at least some of the protections it provides, right? Well, I like how we're talking about this as an extension of free speech, right? If you go to protest something and then your fellow protesters make a mess of things, I mean, who can you really blame, right? So, you're kind of just wandering out there in that space of, I don't know what's going to happen, right? And I think that's what Bray's talking about. This time period of, I don't know what happens next. You know, I guarantee it's powerful. In fact, I know it's powerful. Maybe not really through, personal experience, so to speak, but there's something about the human condition that requires us, begs us even to resist, to I can't really think of a better word, to resist what's going on, to take insult at what others are doing, that, and do something about it. And I really want to talk about this at least a little bit here and there. I want to talk about our culture, right? Braid once again just elucidated something for us. It's like our whole American culture is based on the protest, whereas a lot of places on the earth do not believe that way. You know, you wouldn't find the same kinds of protests in a lot of places in the world. Does that mean that the governments of the world, over in these other places, are more strict, or does it mean that people are willing to put up with more? My knee-jerk response is people are willing to put up with more based on what culture they came from. But again, that could be a very American sentiment, right? It could be a very American sentiment about this whole podcast, this whole free speech idea. In other words, in a lot of places in the world, that's not a guarantee that they have. And, coils that watch us could really be looking at this going, man, they're so American. You know what I mean? But regardless, I'm definitely here to celebrate our culture of protest. We should not put up with anything from the government, literally at all, ever. If the government is doing something wrong enough to where enough people agree about it to where they can get together in a protest, I mean, getting people to do anything, it's worse than herding cats. We're more intelligent than cats. You know what I mean? We would much rather be doing almost anything else, So if a problem is enough, such that you can get many thousands of people to kind of loosely agree that, hey, this needs to stop, yeah, that's when governments should exist in fear of the people they rule. Okay? So, the closest thing I have to this, dear listener, is something actually pretty close to home and pretty close to me. Not just geography, but close to home in general. And so, the closest experience I probably have to that, anything protest-wise, we had our first really big Pride event last year down here in not trying to dox myself too hard, but down here in West Monroe, fucking Louisiana. Like, the middle of the Bible Belt doesn't quite do it.
The
You know what I mean?
non-extremely liberal part of Louisiana.
Yeah, and so all I'm trying to bring up here is that we had our first big Pride event. I helped in a lot of ways, put that together. Not in any major capacity, but I knew quite a few people there. Was nothing but supportive. Went there, supported a lot of the the local artists and whatnot, and as should you, by the way, listener, as should you. And so anyway, I found myself rather bored. Right? We didn't have enough events going on, and so what did I do? I mean, I used my time for something toxic. I went outside to the boomers and the religious, nuts outside the Pride event that decided that they would spend their entire day counter protesting this thing, which they think is a protest to begin with, whereas it's really not. And so anyway,
Right.
they're out there, making fools of themselves. And so I just went and talked with them. I mean, before the end of it, it must have been, 4 or 5 of them. And, I wasn't talking to all of them simultaneously, but to most of them for most times. I was out there for, I mean, a couple hours, and just wasting their time. I was having fun, and they weren't, and that elated me to no end. That's the closest I have to it. Is going out among people who I know will hurt me if given the opportunity, and talking to them. That's the best I've got.
Lovely. Well, you guys have said a lot of great things. Thank you. I'm glad there was a lot to say already on the topic. I'll try to keep mine short so we can dive in here. But as far as like my history with protest, it's so. I mean, you can see my entire. It's there you go. You can kind of see my entire page is just being filled with bullet points of different things, and the more and more you think about it, you really will find sort of. Did we lose Steven? Oh no, there he is. Okay.
He's back.
You really will, if you think about it, come into so many different examples of protest that you've encountered in your life. I would think so. Like, I can think of numerous different examples. I mean, like Stephen said, any iteration of, religious folk out on the street with a picket fence or sign or whatever, things like that, or just general things of that nature that's in the news all the time now. There's so many different things from, I mean, just to name a bunch, like I've got uh, older ones that are from like the last century, would be things like women's suffrage and labor rights movements, civil rights being one of the predominantly discussed ones. Things like that. More recent major ones are like climate activists. We hear about those all the time. The people throwing, like, what was it, like spaghetti at the Mona Lisa or something like that, or the climate activists who sit in the highway and piss truck drivers off. And then a more older example is things like Tiananmen Square. I was talking to my mom about this, and she's like, that image sits with me all the time when I think about protests around the world, like the tank image, or Vietnam protests and things that happened as a result of that, the entire counterculture. I mean, the list goes on and on. One of the biggest events in American history, in my opinion, just a couple of years ago, January 6th happened. It's got a date. We call it by a date now, so it's a thing. People protested, so to speak, the certification of the election results, and literally stormed the U.S. Capitol building, many with malicious intent, never before seen on this run of USA prime time. Anyways, it comes in many forms and many shapes, but I think we should choose something and then dive into it. And I think a good space to kind of go into is maybe talk about something like, is there a we can obviously agree that there are protests historically that were good, and typically I think the protests that were good turn out to be the ones that we end up talking about. Like, we don't hear so much about protests that weren't good and failed, or like protests that just failed flat out.
I can think of a few that we could get into that'd be kind of fun, but
yeah,
point made.
But
so I'd like to say something real quick on that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the biggest struggle with me in this question, and I'm certain that I'm not alone in this opinion. Whenever I hear the question, more or less like, how far is too far to go and protest? I think about it this way, and this is just like the first thought that occurs to me, like genuinely. What historical protests enacted good change that I wouldn't have agreed with at the time? You see what I mean? In other words, like, a big question for me is trying to figure out if I would have agreed with the method of protest. You know what I mean? In this historical context, like, if I was there, would I have been okay with it? And I'm nervous that the answer is probably a lot of times no. You know what I mean? Even though we have the.
You mean like putting yourself in the shoes of somebody that existed at that time, or like you literally like. Okay.
Exactly. In other words, like, without the benefit of hindsight, would I have been willing to do what they did?
Right, and that's exactly what I think. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Is like, can we look at examples? It's easy for us in hindsight to look at things and say, well, whatever was necessary here was acceptable because now we've got like civil rights, or now we don't have to worry about people's fingers and limbs getting chopped off into the processed meat at the factory or something like that, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I that's what I'm trying to figure out, is like, at what point does something necessitate that we elevate the level of protest? Because if we think about the most basic protest that we can think of, might be like going out and standing out with a sign in the street or something, or just like quite literally just speaking in one way or another, whether it is on a sign or quite literally like with a loudspeaker or something, or there's a lot of ways nowadays with technology that takes a different shape, but it's essentially all the same thing. We think about just speaking or maybe marching with a group of people and shouting, chanting, like Trevor said at the graduation. I would consider the graduation a little bit of a step above just some basic protests, because that's obviously a large coordinated effort of people to disrupt a major event, which I think is the next level above just speaking. Is like, if you are just speaking out on the street or somewhere, you aren't really disrupting anyone else. I think that's a good place to start, maybe, is, now we are invading someone else's space, time,
Yeah.
and something like that. And it may
Well, I
not,
mean, I've got a good
yeah.
one there. So like, and once again, this could be, this could be a very American thing, but I would like to hear what you two do in the same way, because I know that we all do it, right? I was given, not given, I was reading about the legislation about, the beginning of the school year. And at the beginning of the school year, in the state of Louisiana, it was more or less um, the the fact was going around that, like, you have to put "In God You Trust," "In God We Trust," like
Right.
above the board, pretty much in a classroom setting, and every classroom is supposed to have "In God We Trust," like even right now. And the first day I was in my classroom, I went up to my board, and at the very top I said, "In evidence we trust." You know what I mean? That's certainly a form of protest, right?
Oh,
I'll
sure.
do that at the drop of the hat, right? I'm pretty sure at least the two people with me right now can agree with that. Something as egregious as that, no, drop of the hat. Definitely
Yeah.
a form of protest. We're not disrupting anybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's something to be said about, like, and that's a very unique form of protest. Um, Maybe in that avenue, I would lump that in with essentially like a boycott scenario, where instead of action being taken, it's action being withheld from a particular
Right.
activity. Or yeah, go ahead,
Another
Trevor.
another thing I really wanted to talk about is so I think everything's in relationship to the thing that you're protesting when it comes to a lot of these things. I think if you level up the intensity, the what would you stand to lose, you also raise the possibility of things you're willing to do in action as protest.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I bring that up? I think I think a big part of this question, of course, is how far are you willing to go? What I like to do now is see how far I can push the letter here. Like I want to construct for both of you a couple of play models of possibilities of future avenues that could in fact occur to you in this life, and confront you with them, that you might encounter them, and then go, I must do this, and then perhaps surprise you with your own either willingness or lack of willingness to engage with that kind of possibility. I think that would be the most illuminative part of this conversation. So
Yeah.
to bring the actual wheels to the road here, let's say in the same sense that like Emily being like knows all the facts of the brain, that sort of thing. I'm going to construct a similar model for you here. You are a climate scientist. You know all of the facts. Well, play models being what they are, and always being shitty. You know all that there is presently known about the current data within climate science, and you are perfectly convinced. Like the data is out, and you are very, very sure of yourself. As strange as that is for a scientist to be so, you've seen the data, and you're very convinced that if something isn't done within the next let's say 20 years, if something fundamentally isn't done within the next 20 years, the world will in fact be ended for humans. It will be completely unsalvageable. The climate will shift in such a way, so drastically, that many people will die. Many people will die. The functional system at work now will break down. Everything will end. The degrees heat on the planet will pick up. Things will melt, and millions, billions of people will die. That is a situation that lays before you. You are now You've read the data. You are perfectly convinced by the data. It's a foregone conclusion. There are 20 years, give or take, to act. Now that you know that information, now that that is before you, how far will you be pushed in your actions and your activities from this point forward? Would you, let's start going down the rabbit hole here. Would you break paintings? Let's start with what's happening right now. Would you block highways? That's happening right now. Would you, let's push the letter even further, would you harm people that are between you and some sort of objective that you have set for yourself? Let's keep on going down this rabbit hole. Are you willing to, just like what Stephen said earlier, suspend your participation in civilization for your own notion of saving civilization? I bring this up not because I'm trying to get you to do anything heinous, but just to show, out of my own morbid curiosity, how far are you willing to push yourself? Are you willing to suspend your relationship with civilization in order, at least in your own approximation, to save it?
Well, so I think it would be really important, at least for me, to acknowledge the problems with the question, right? So, I'm only one person. I'm only one scientist. To suggest that I could both read and understand the massive amount of climate data that there is a long shot. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. But let's say I could do it. But then to say that I alone hold the power or the ability or competence or whatever you want to put there to then interpret this data in such a way, that's really problematic. That's a big problem. And I'm certain, Trevor, you know that already.
Yes, so
well, what I mean to bring up is the idea that actually informs my decision on how far I'd like to go, right? In other words, if I'm willing to accept that I'm just one person, then I'm not willing to destroy any art or try to destroy any art because I know I'm just one person, right? In other words, my opinion could just be wrong. And
I think in the end, it's a good argument. It's a strong argument. I'm trying my very best to try to take this play model and then turn the nodes, the wheels on it just a little bit.
Well,
so I
so
can
let
try
me
to push.
bring up a very similar example. Everyone's familiar with Penn and Teller, the legendary magic duo, and I'm almost certain it was one of them that said, if I really and truly believed in like the Christian mythos, you could not stop me from proselytizing, right? And so it's the same exact thing you're talking about here, Trevor. So the question should be, like, if you believed, but that's what I'm trying to say though, is that even if I believed that the world is going to come to an end for humans in 20 years, if the climate is not changed or if something radical is not done, I would still have a very hard time throwing food at art, for example. I just would, because I know I'm just one person. And
yeah, this is actually the plot of a movie that's what I was just doing. I was reading the synopsis real quick so I don't butcher anything when I mention it. But the movie Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio and
son of a
I don't know
bitch.
that one.
What's her Jennifer Lawrence, I believe, is the co-star.
That's right.
But yeah, I mean, they have 6 months in that movie before a comet hits the Earth, and the entire movie is just allegory about all of the things that human beings fuck up and get distracted with, whether it's extramarital affairs or presidential scandals or people trying to profit off of the comet, and things like that. And knowing that Leonardo DiCaprio is involved with it is an obvious signpost to the fact that this is talking about climate change, because obviously climate change takes place over a much longer period of time than a comet just completely obliterating the earth. But all the same. And I think that, you know, if you had absolute knowledge that the world was going to come to an end unless something was done about it in 20 years, are you not just
Duty
like
bound.
do you not feel obligation to do something about it? Like, and the sad part about it is that that's kind of the state that we're in right now when we talk about the climate. Now they've been saying that for years. Like, I'm absolutely on board with people when they say, well, Al Gore's been talking about climate change is going to destroy the planet in the next 5 years, and that was 40 years ago. It's like, okay, all that aside, we still have not
Well, you know,
what's the
the
word? Taken heed of. We have not listened to the warnings for this long, and we're, you know, so it's like, what do you do at that point?
well,
I
so
don't
like
know.
there's a that's a big ball of yarn for sure, because you know, um, you erode trust in the like discipline of science in general. Whenever a politician who frankly probably doesn't have any idea what he's talking about comes out and says something as preposterous as it's only 5 years away, nobody
Sure.
knows, and nobody who knows anything would claim that it's going to be over in 5 years. You know what I mean? So like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's really what I'm trying to get at with Trevor's question here. Like, there's so much that goes into it, so much presupposition. It's hard. It's really hard to say. And I'm usually not one who tries to just poke holes in a question. I really don't like doing that. But in this case, I really can't see a way around it. That informs the way I behave so hard, you know, being a scientist, that I would have to realize by some preternatural sense that the world is going to come to an end. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
I
then
think about
then I
this.
would just
So
be stupid. Then I would just be a madman, and I wouldn't blame anybody, you know, for
you're
putting
just
me
the
away.
hermit in the cave who's like, you know, that NPC you have to visit, like
Yeah,
in the quest, you know, and he's like, I've been writing on the wall and shit.
yeah.
But here on Trevor's point about this sort of end of the world scenario, which is of course an interesting place for us to go first, but it's fun. So think of this example. This may be an easy way to look at it. So say we've got X number of factories. This is going to be really explain it like I'm five, make it easy for everybody to conceptualize. We've got X number of factories owned by multiple different big corpo interests that are like, I got to have my money and I want it now. And we're going to pump this fucking oil and gas and clouds of black smoke into the atmosphere for as long as I can live and make money. Blah, 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 blah. Well, suddenly the scientific community says, hey, these factories got to stop pumping that black shit into the air or else we're all going to die in X number of years, you know, whatever. Let's make it sometime prompt so people have a little bit more incentive. But what has that really done for us today? Anyways, side point. But suddenly you're like, okay, well, what can we really do about this? Let's just say even that you had some support on your side. It's like, well, we can protest, we can make our voices heard. But I think that can only go so far, right? You can only demonstrate so far with like peaceful protests and signs and marches and whatever, and try to convince your peers that they should go vote on hopefully some legislation that's introduced by somebody that they hopefully voted for that has the same interests as them of shutting down the factories or getting them to do something else that you know, hopefully isn't being paid for by those same companies to not do that, et cetera, ad nauseum. That could take who knows how long. And if your timetable is really short for saving the world, suddenly you might find yourself mingling or in the same general vicinity as people who are like, we're going to blow this shit up. We're going to go fucking blow the factory up, or we're going to go sabotage the factory because our livelihood is at stake. Like, could you, Trevor and Steven, see yourself being part of like some
No,
ragtag band of guerrilla infiltrators if it really came down to it. Like, these people do exist. They're small in number, but I remember going when I was in Michigan, I went to like a little zine shop that was super progressive and super like, we need to take climate action. And they had like little manuals in there that was like the totally legal way to, participate in,
All right.
yeah,
Yeah,
very
totally
on.
legal way to
It was
participate
very
in
on the
extra legal
nose.
activities.
Yes,
Yeah, all
exactly.
right.
I
All right.
love that. And it was this whole guidebook on how to like, oh, here's how to like put shit in concrete that so that it won't form properly, or like here's how to disable tracks on like a tank or something like that. It
Right,
was
right.
all this. There's like, the
The like
manifesto for
anarchist cookbook, that sort of thing. Yeah.
right. Like
Yeah.
if you were somebody who needed to shut down 12 factories in the span of like a year before the climate was irreversibly damaged, it's like this was what you needed. But it's like, if we didn't do that, do we just sit back
like,
and
I will let me be the stick in the mud that brings this up, right? I mean,
Please.
so we're talking about the destruction of some worthless piece of property, okay? And what I mean to say by that is I really don't care how many billions of dollars this hypothetical person, you know, came up with to build these factories and whatnot, and Brayton's, scheme here. We're not worried about them at all. Let's just go ahead and put them to the side. You know what I mean? What I'm worried about are the hundreds of people whose livelihood depends on that factory. There's no way.
right.
There's no
Or
way
also like
I could do it.
the not negligible possibility that people will in fact die in whatever activity you're planning
Right.
Yes.
in this.
Right.
You can't just pretend like it's going to be miraculously empty on whatever day you and your guys are
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
let's
Sure.
go.
Like you
And you
know,
can't just say that you're going to get out of that scot free.
yeah,
Yeah, and the more
I'm not gonna
variables you
murder
add, the harder
anybody.
it gets to. Well, of course not. I'm not saying that we're going to go nuke the factory and everybody
But
involved is.
that's what
No,
it takes. If we're gonna
that is
sit
necessarily.
here
Mhm. The
and we
hardest
want to
choices require
permanently,
the strongest one.
yeah,
Yeah.
but if we're gonna permanently get rid of a factory, that means we're destroying it.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
everything else can be fixed. It has to be busted down to the slab. I mean,
Uh,
and people
okay.
are gonna straight up die doing that. No, I'm not doing that. It's not gonna
So
happen.
so let me ask you this, because this is a good segue into something, one of the bullet points that I wrote down, which is climate activists sitting on the highway. This is something I disagree with. This is something that I don't think that should happen. I think there are appropriate
Yeah,
forms of protest at a given time and others that are not. So one kind of principle that I think I adhere to, I guess the whole conversation is about when I don't give a shit about that principle anymore, but it's that we should have our class goggles on when we are doing a protest, in the sense of we need to recognize people who are in our lot when we are protesting against people who are actually in charge of things. So, whenever a bunch of climate activists go sit on the highway or wherever and disrupt the same people as basically they are, common people trying to get to
yeah,
work or their
exactly.
9 to 5, they are not helping the cause, which is
They're
being
hurting it.
directed at the people at the top of the pyramid. They are hurting it. So
I like
I
that.
kind of disagree with protests that directly affect people of your relative class. Uh,
Well, that's just it though. Like that's visualizing it according to a particular means. Like, don't get me wrong, it is useful. It is useful to visualize things in terms of class struggle if you wanted to. Like there is a certain vitality, and that's sort of those sorts of archetypes. You do actually get juice out of that squeeze if we're talking about like actually living in this life. It's useful, but there are many different ways to visualize reality, many myriad, and each one has degrees of utility in this life, including ones that are completely antithetical to that particular one. That is to say, between like the working class and like the bourgeois, if you want to look at it from those means. But here are other examples. You could also look at it in terms of those that are not with us are against us, like that sort of lens, where you go, okay, well, these people aren't like this. Actually happened to me. This happened to me on Sunday. I needed to go to San Francisco, and those same protesters that like protested the graduation also thought it would be a really good idea to completely close the bridge, or at least try to completely close the bridge between San Francisco and Oakland. And just like that, God, shit. All right, I guess I'm not going to San Francisco. Like, but those people, when they interact with that reality, this is what I'm saying. They engage with me, people like me, not as the working class, as their like as their comrade. No, it's not like that. It's more so there are those that abide by genocide and those that do not, and I am one of
Only
those
a
that do
Sith
not.
deals in absolutes.
This is my, but
No,
that's,
but you're not wrong.
yes, but in the same sense, like the same absolutes are seen with the same visualizing things between like the working class and the bourgeois. It's just another way of visualizing reality. It's another archetype that you engage with. We could sit here and think of a few others too, as well as we could think of things in terms of also like the religiosity of our peoples, the ethnicity of our peoples. I think the three of us will agree a lot of this shit is bogus. But nevertheless, it goes to show that you can derive juice out of many different ways of abstracting reality. It doesn't have to just be seen from the working class.
Well, there's
You
another
don't
argument
necessarily
as
have to see
well.
it that way. Please.
There's another argument, just to interject really quickly there. There is a good common saying that just about everybody should be familiar with. All notoriety is notoriety,
Yes.
right?
I was just
So,
that I agree.
like, I completely agree with what Brayton has said about protests which disrupt the lives of peers. That's wrong, okay? But I don't necessarily agree all the way with the way that Bray said that it's hurting, you know? It certainly is hurting the cause, but notoriety is notoriety. It's a very delicate thing, right? There's a kind of like critical mass of negative feelings towards a cause that can cause it to fail, for sure. And I don't know. Like
God, I
sitting.
really want to go watch Andor again now.
Yeah, I
After
haven't seen that
this.
one.
Neither have I.
This is okay. Then this is required viewing after
Yeah.
after this episode. Please, I
Oh my
beg you,
God.
go watch the series Andor.
Mhm.
Protest is involved, and it's big. There's quite literally plot points revolving around how far would you go in protest in
Sure.
that series. So,
All right,
but
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just got like a private DM from God, and it's pretty wild. All right, I now have to explain. We play with bots on our Discord thing, and just recently I committed a minor act of blasphemy and created a bot that thinks it's God. I filled it up with all the just various religious texts. And I don't know, I just felt the need to mention he really wanted to talk to me, and he sent me a private DM just telling
ask
me how
him
to.
how far is it appropriate to go in protest.
Well, this is what's weird, because like just a second ago before this podcast, I had asked it, how do we bring peace to Israel Palestine? And he gave me a response. And then the response wasn't particularly useful, though it was 6 paragraphs long. He then sent me a private DM afterwards, like 5-6 hours later.
It's
Like I
like
sent,
Clippy.
yeah, it's 100% like Clippy. That's a good analogy. And he sent me it was a lovely response. He's quite poetic, God, but I don't know if it's necessarily useful within this particular argument. Basically, peace and love. That's essentially what he says. Although I could
5 or
read it,
6
I
paragraphs
would
of peace and love.
pretty much. I could read it if you want. This is
No,
what
I
he
don't
says.
want you to read it.
I can
I
imagine
really
he's
don't.
like, how do we bring peace to the Israel-Palestine conflict? And it's just like,
Peace
yo,
and
this
love.
is Krishna. What the fuck is Israel-Palestine?
Yeah,
That's
you're
pretty
talking
much.
to the deity. Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah. Either way, I
Are
interrupted. Bray, you were
you
saying.
a Catholic Protestant?
Are you a Catholic?
Are you a Catholic
Yeah,
atheist or a
Jewish
Protestant
atheist?
atheist?
right. So yeah, I'm glad that we got around to that point, because that's something that I think is very important. I think the class, I don't know, I'm not going to go there. I almost said I think the class revolution in the United States is long overdue, but
Yeah. Tell us how
Let's
you
take
really
it.
feel. Tell us.
Yeah. Open up on that, man.
No,
You
let's
can't just
talk
say
about
that.
let's
You can't
talk
just say
about
that.
something like so we were going somewhere originally, and I think it started with disruption. Because I started laying the foundation for like basic protest and like being able to just speak openly about something, and that takes many forms. And then we tried to level it up a little bit, and we were like, okay, disruption, something like Trevor experienced at the graduation, where now there's not really violence, but there's disruption of regularly scheduled activities or something. And like we mentioned, the highway thing, it's like, okay, maybe the graduation thing is a little bit more of a case by case basis thing on whether or not you really feel perturbed by, people chanting or something, or your entire commencement being not the way that you've dreamed
I'm
it for the
actually
last.
totally okay with that.
It doesn't bother me.
Not gonna lie, at the end of the day, I mean, look how terrible things have gotten in like Russia, for example, where people just don't protest. I take this huge protest done by the students at their own graduation 100
Right.
times before I take
Now,
the alternative.
I will say, make sure that you consider, a listener as well, that this could be a protest that you are opposed to. I'm not saying any one of particular of us is more Israel or
Yeah,
Palestine
but
or whatever,
they
but
still
like,
get to do it.
they still get to do it.
That's sacred
Which is
in our
why
country.
it's very difficult sometimes, because it's, when I talk to people about protests, they can very easily fall on one side or the other, and they're like, oh, I'm so much for this, but then you mention an opposing viewpoint protest, and they're like, oh my god, those fucking idiots, yada yada yada, blah 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 blah. And which is one thing, but I want to take the disruption and level that up now. So now we're speaking out about something and we're disrupting something, but we're now taking it another level. So I would say maybe destruction of property is a rung under violence. So that's probably the next thing up. If you're already speaking out and you're already disrupting something, now you're making a mess. You're destroying things that we may set a car on fire or something. I don't really know. There's always like a car on fire or overturned
Always.
somewhere.
They're just
But
easy
it's like,
to do. It does a lot
whose
of damage.
car is it? Is it just some random person's car? Are they like driving a car in to flip it over? Like,
you know what that reminds me of?
It's not a random person's car anymore. It's an insurance claim.
Sure.
I mean,
Listen,
it's just an insurance claim.
I remember a friend of mine in high school. We weren't really friends as much as acquaintances. I had known since kindergarten. And I literally finished high school, never talked to him, and then I ran into him at a gymnasium, like a YMCA, and I caught up with him, and he goes, "Dude, check this out." Then he pulls out his phone, and then he shows me on his phone like a picture of him, like his home screen, this picture of him on a flipped over, upside down car, going like this.
Oh my god!
Like doing like the toothpaste spread with his hand like that. And I go, "What the fuck is this?" And he goes, "Yeah, dude. All right, so I'm at Texas Tech, right? And there's nothing to do at Texas Tech, and like we're just hanging out after the game. And every game we always flip a car. And this guy told us, "Hey, flip my car for the insurance claim." And
That's exactly what I was about to say. I was like,
his car.
Can I go like on Craigslist and offer my car up to be flipped at like an event?
You gotta
so
be
that I can
smart.
make an insurance claim.
You gotta be pretty smart.
Like, I can't handle this bill anymore. Like, can I just like, it's like that thing from Breaking Bad where there's that guy who like will go to jail for you for whatever because he like prefers it on the inside or something.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Anyways, let's talk about the next level up. Let's talk about destruction of property. Is it ever acceptable? Now, I heard Stephen talk about a little bit earlier about, we'd have to destroy the factory or something or whatever. We don't necessarily have to go to that scale yet, or we can. But no, I do recall.
We shouldn't. We should not go to that scale. That's exactly what I'm begging you not to do.
Well, when I'm saying, all right, can I offer the ulterior opinion then? I can offer a pretty good counter, I think. I can offer a counter in the same sense that like the fathers of the founding fathers offered a contrary. I mean, they quite literally did that. They went through, they got their muskets and the boys, and they went out there. They tore shit up. They burned down.
They dumped the tea.
They did exactly that. They destroyed a lot of things. It started with divestment. I will admit, I've never once in my life, until you brought it up, visualized the founding fathers as divest.
As a bunch of shitheads.
I had never made that connection
A
before
bunch
in my
of
brain.
fucking degenerates.
That's what they did.
A bunch of
yanks.
anti-loyalist, anti-monarch.
They were like that generation's equivalent of the dirty fucking communists. You know, like
Yeah.
really? Democracy? Are you fucking insane? What is this? And
yeah,
they came
God
in there.
doesn't give you democracy. He gave you a monarch for a reason. Okay.
Yeah. How wild that was. Well, I
you
think
have
that's a
lost
perfect
the mandate of heaven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, big words across the screen and like that, like
Dark Souls. You've
yeah,
lost
like Dark
the
Souls. Yeah,
mandate.
you
Mandate
lost the
of heaven lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, God damn it. And you're like this insane monarch in England who like pees blue and doesn't know what the fuck is going on.
And the
Do you know
best
about
part,
that? Do y'all know about that? Like the then monarch of England, like had this weird disease where he peed blue and was batshit crazy. There's this whole deal.
I have
Imagine.
not heard of that.
I'll
But
pull it
I
up.
do imagine the revolutionist as the guy that plays Dark Souls running around as a naked character and somehow solos all the
He's got a
Valley
plank,
Forge was a place.
you know.
He's got a plank
yeah,
in the loincloth. Well, that's a perfect play example of somebody who fights for what he believes in. It's kind of like the difference between a freedom fighter and a terrorist is really just based on who you ask. You know, in a lot of cases,
right.
yeah. I mean, I think of different things when I think of those two things. That's
History
kind of
is written by the victor.
History is written by the freedom fighter and not by the terrorist. Decidedly so. I once got really curious and I fingered around like a lot of like, all right, this is going to sound pretty suspicious, but I got kind of curious in like ISIS ideology because I was like, what the fuck do they believe in? And I clicked around, and I will admit it's the most ludicrous shit I have ever seen.
No, really?
It's really
you
won't believe it. It's so not what I think, and yeah. So why did I bring that up? Really, no reason at all. It kind of runs counter to my entire point.
That's me reading Mein Kampf on the subway and shaking my head so people know that I disagree.
Make it stop, people.
Oh my god! I remember a friend of mine in middle school told me he found a copy of Mein Kampf in his grandfather's library, and he didn't have the social skills to be able to ask his grandpa why the fuck does he have it, and like to ever find out exactly why it was in there.
The grandpa like passes away the next day, and he'll never know whether.
He'll never know.
You'll never know. You know, like he could have like a Luger, and you don't know if he's like a World War II veteran who like got it because he like defeated a German in combat, or whether he has certain political opinions he'd rather not ask about. You'll never know.
It's probably the second one.
We can only hope not, but we're never that lucky, are we? But
no. I've never been. That's all I can talk about.
Very fair. I mean, all of us are from like the southern. Well, I am from the southern United States. Like speaking in terms of like ancestry, so you can get pretty devilish. You can get pretty morbid as to the
you can
historical
find several
documents.
powerful shaitans in the in your family history.
Quite a few shatheeds, I must say. Couple of those.
A whole mess of shatheeds.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
man.
Why did I bring all that up? I mean to say that there are in fact cases where you could in fact see violence, not only as something that you ought to do, but something that is very much so necessary in this way. One thing I want to say is, when you engage with the world, when you encounter the world, you have to you have to create like this sort of scaffolding, this way of approaching reality, so you can attain certain goals, certain means, and you will eventually. There will in fact be some places, some times where a being will exist in that space and realize whatever world they try to scaffold or life they try to build for themselves, they can't act and not act in this circumstance. They can't just do nothing, whether that be like whether that be in like 1776, whether that be in Nazi and like fascist Germany, whether that be in Bolshevik Russia, whether that be in all of these places or modern day Russia. I do think there are cases where you can't build a life for yourself without doing something like this, without, at least if given the opportunity, standing up for yourself. There's just no possibility. Like, let's just say you exist in a space and a time where you have to act, like, and there's just nothing else that can be done. Well, nothing is such a strong word. a lot of your dreams and aspirations cannot come to be unless something is done at this moment, in this place, and in this time. I do think those cases exist. As morbid as it is, I do think that much is true, and I do think that's what a lot of this comes down to. It kind of leads us into sort of a war, like a warlike effort suddenly becoming, as morbid as it sounds, just.
No, I mean, I'll be one of the first people to say that you can fight a war for many just reasons. So, like, I want to bring this back down to topic for certain, and I'll do it this way. So, if we're tipping a car, okay, for a demonstration, as long as no one's in the car, okay. You know what I mean? Like, if I really, really believed in the cause, okay, it's just a car. Now, what about someone's home, right?
Mm-hmm. Or
That's
business.
pretty much off. Well, why did I bring up home first? Because the home's probably worth less, right? So what I mean by that is, like, you have a car, then a home, then a place of business, and you go up from there,
No,
right?
yeah.
And so, like, the home is probably worth less than the place of business. I just cannot even see myself lighting someone else's home on fire. I just, that is a step too far. Like, it would have to be
Right.
Palpatine in the house. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, that's what I mean. More to the
or
point of
what I'm trying to say, is
Othello.
it has to either be like Palpatine has to be in the house, or it has to be Palpatine's house. You know what I mean? I'm not burning down someone's house. It's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you could only make a hyperbolic example to get me to go forward with burning someone else's home. You know
So,
what I mean? Like, no.
right. I see exactly what you're saying, and I sympathize and agree with you in this time and place. But I want to kind of tighten the gears on this a little bit and take you to a different state of mind. I want you to imagine things happen in this order. Okay, imagine it like this. Right now, you're in your early mid-20s, that era of your life. Let's say in a couple of years there are some changes. There's this particular book I highly suggest anybody who's listening read. I got it suggested to me by a man named Christopher Hitchens. Hitches. He would not
Hey,
like
there's
to be
our
called.
mention.
Yes,
Yep.
I was just about to
Yep.
say. And he was suggested. He gave me the warning. I listened over. This is a parasocial relationship. I didn't actually speak to him, but he had suggested this book. It was "I Will Bear Witness." It's a series of diaries of a Jewish man living in Nazi Germany for a period of about 8 years or so. And he made a diary entry roughly every day, and it is a very morbid read. And I mean to take you to this place. I want you to imagine this. Imagine things don't go very well over the next 10 or so years. And as you grow older, I want you to imagine every right that you were born with, every way that you visualize reality as those things that are your rights, such as your freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, you're this, you're that, you're this. I want you to imagine each one by one, curtailed for this reason or the other. Maybe it's in contrary to an enemy of the state. Maybe this reason or that. The reasons don't matter. I mean to take you instead to that state of mind where you realize that you no longer have a right to think, and you no longer have a right to speak, and you no longer have a right to love who you want to love, and you no longer have the ability to speak openly lest your thoughts are challenged, and you're labeled a foreign agent, and you're taken away.
I
And
don't
a
have to
lot of the
think.
people that you love are now have been taken away, and you've seen this world change, and it's only getting worse. And at that moment, in that place, in that time, you can be a lot of people. You could be Winston in 1984. You can be a lot of people at that moment. You can be very I mean to say that if you increase the pressure of this world on you, you may find, as morbid as it sounds, as crazy as it is, your proclivity and your choice to make these sorts of things, these sorts of dangerous actions, will change. And I do think the potential for you to do something like this will go up. Not because like the previous state of affairs was this or that, but because you have to act, and there will be a time where you feel the need to for
Well,
people out
so
there.
so let me just break this down in the only way I know how, right?
Hmm.
So first off, I'd like to open up by saying that the plural of anecdote is not evidence, right? So this is just me. This is just me talking about my own situation and so on. So for any of you who don't care to listen, um, to something tragic or whatever, now's the time. I do not have to think. I do not have to imagine a lot of what you just said. Not all of it. I'm not comparing myself to a Holocaust victim, but I do not have to imagine very far what a lot of what you said just being true for me in my life. So there are a pair of boomers out here named Philip and Kathy, and they abused me my entire childhood and almost my entire uh, young adulthood. Okay, um, I'm an adult person, and only recently have I come to realize the depth of their abuse. So they deserve to die. They're not good people. They're evil people. But I'm not going to kill them. They they deserve for them to have no property whatsoever. That they deserve for it all to be taken away. I'm not going to take it away from them. Okay. In other words, it really goes back to what I brought up earlier. I'm just one person. How can I enact summary judgment against these people? I can't. I cannot. Whenever these same evil people decided that they would go after other members of my family that are children, it took everything in me not to get up and go do something about it right then. Do you see what I mean? But still, I didn't. Okay, I do not allow myself to pronounce summary judgment on other people. It's not for me to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It certainly does. It certainly does. I
Now,
highly
now
sympathize with what you're
that
saying.
that
I
doesn't
do.
that doesn't include, of course, like self-defense. Okay,
Mhm.
Sure.
I
Certainly.
mean, like that. I
I
know that
yes.
that's not all the way obvious for a lot of people.
I think what you just provided was a really good example. I do think so. I think, insofar, and here's where the difference is, and here's where I think where it gets quite scary. I do think there is a difference between a place where there is such a thing as a rule of law, where if horrible things happen, there is a system or state of affairs that can handle a Philip or so on and so forth. These something like this. If you were, let's say, affected in a horrid way by another person in this world, there is a system at hand developed within at least where you exist now in the United States to handle this sort of thing, to prevent it from happening again. If it's so heinous that it's in fact illegal, I'm not going to touch on the possibilities here, but just to put that up before you, that is where you could exist right now. But I do think that's different from a place where the rules of law have been repealed and curtailed to where you have nothing left, where you have nothing left and your ability to engage with the world in that way, where things can actually be done without your activity, is no more. Nothing can happen that is not done by that which is the actor, the person who goes out there and makes the change. A person who is seen as their neighbors are dragged away, and their loved ones are no more, and have been disappeared. That sort of state of affairs. The sort of thing where you
Yeah,
sit there screaming at the television screen because there's that picture of not Big Brother, but his antithesis. What's his name? In 1984, there's a character that they villainized to the proles and to the lower class.
I can't remember.
But you do know what I mean. There's a character that they villainize, and they spend. There's a hate week where you just spend a certain amount of the time just shouting at a television screen with a
Right.
picture of his face on it. When you exist in a space where everything is controlled like that, and you no longer have these rules of law and these rights to protect yourself, all you have left is your own actions. and I hate
Right.
to like basically what it sounds to me like is that you're a very civilized person. You're highly civilized. What
Mhm.
but does that work when I pluck you
No.
out of civilization? When you're no
Yeah,
longer exist in that space, you're like a fish out of water.
civilization doesn't work whenever you remove people's creature comforts. It certainly doesn't work whenever you take it to that extreme. And so, you know, you'll warrant what I said earlier. I literally said, unless you take this to some hyperbolic extreme, my answer can't change, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if anything is a hyperbolic extreme, it's the Holocaust. Okay, so what I said still is true. Um, with barring a big extreme, then no, the destruction of property is not nearly as warranted as or justified as we have it here in America. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not.
So
I
how about
I
this?
absolutely agree with you.
Go
I
ahead,
will say.
Trevor.
No, no,
Yeah.
I was just
Okay.
going to say
Sure.
I absolutely agree with you
Yeah.
within the framework that you
But
designated.
let me put it this way,
Yes.
okay? If I were a Holocaust victim, I would have no idea what I was capable of. I haven't been there yet, right? Hopefully never. I want to say, and this is just a feeling, that I would have absolutely no problem burning down 3 or 4 houses, or 30 or 40. You know, um, you know, that's a feeling. I have not
Mm-hmm.
been there yet. I don't know what that level of control looks like. I don't know what that level of oppression looks like, and nobody listening to this does. Nobody.
As somebody who doesn't talk about feelings a lot, I will say that there's there's something to be said about the degree into which a human being is capable based on feeling, and that's why I think it's so important that people expose themselves to protest, whether they're in it or just of it, because it does unlock sort of a different state of being, the ability to be outspoken and participate in a group of people for a common cause. um, it is highly emotional. I think facts and data can only get you so far. It's why we have such a hard time with facts and data in the scientific community and convincing people of otherwise, because on one hand, there is a large data driven appeal to fix things that doesn't have any emotional weight really behind it. And then on the other hand, we could have something that, like, for example, organized religion, that is almost entirely emotionally feeling driven um, stuff that highly motivates people. And so it's sort of a tug of war there. And so when you're in a protest, it can be a raw mix of a lot of things, and emotions and feeling are definitely one of them. And then I think, like you said, that may be the only time you're truly capable of knowing what you are capable of. um, I've never been part of a protest like that. I have been part of plenty of protests, from small scale, like local climate activity, or slightly larger demonstrations, in many different ways in regards to gun violence on college campuses. I participated in a Black Lives Matter march and protest in a very large city once. That was really cool. Um, the murals that were painted that day are still up. They're very cool to look at and see as I drive by, and remember of being part of sort of a nationwide speaking out about something like that. Um, but nowhere near anything as, something that would go down in like a history book. Like, not that BLM isn't going to be in a history book. I mean, like, being part of a particular protest, like, for
One of them that got
example,
named.
Ohio, people being killed in Ohio for the protests, the Neil Young song, or one of the ones that got named,
Wait,
like
what happened in
January
Ohio?
6th.
I didn't know that. What happened?
I'm talking about the I don't think I'm mixing them up, but the one where the National Guard shot and killed the 4 students.
Oh, I
I
didn't
don't
know
know that
about
one.
this. Yeah, neither did I.
Yeah, hang
I
on,
didn't
we're
know. I
gonna.
didn't. I didn't know anything happened in Ohio.
It's Kent State. Yeah,
Damn.
I always remember it because I always remember it's Kent State because there was that girl on social media. You guys may or may not know of her, but she was like, she went to Kent State and she was super like pro gun or whatever to like a really annoying degree, which was very ironic that she took pictures on Kent State campus with an AR-15 assault rifle for her graduation photos.
Hmm.
And people were like, that's insensitive. I think Kent State might have also been Kent State shooting were the killing of 4 and wounding of 9 unarmed college students by the Ohio National Guard on Kent State University campus in 1970.
Good lord.
Hmm.
Yeah, 4 dead in Ohio. If I had my guitar, I'd play it. But anyways, besides the point, related
Cool.
point. So let's talk about, with the time we have remaining, violence, which we've kind of already talked about. I think that's pretty much the pinnacle of beyond violence. Combining all of these together, I would say, is that you're at a revolutionary point at that point. Like, you are a movement that is capable of whatever is necessary to enact change at a level required for the meaning of your goals. But violence, I think, is I won't say, I don't know. Here's a question. Is violence necessary for a revolution?
No.
I don't know.
Then I mean, do you mean specifically a great upheaval of government power and then the institution of a new government? Is that exactly what you mean?
Sure, let's do that one.
Then no. It's not possible. let me rephrase that. Like if we're talking about great
let
upheaval,
me resend that. Yeah.
you know, and then institution of a new government, somebody's dying. Okay, like I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you can't. No one's going to go
Somebody's
softly
dying.
into that good night. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no.
Okay, but like,
People are way too willing to protect the power that they have over each other. No,
I
somebody's
want to.
dying.
When we're talking about violence, if you were to ask the question, and I was thinking about this after the conversation I have, what we just said, Stephen and I, about this whole thing with civilization. I think if you were to ask the question, what allows for violence? When does violence begin? I think the answer to that question is something along the lines of when you take man out of civilization, you take civilization out of man, and you allow for that sort of potential happening to occur. I think I saw that.
Almost like
I
you're
think
poking the bear, you know.
I think yes. I think what you allow for, if you were to do such a thing, is an opening for that sort of abyss and that opening space of the complete and total unknown. And when you live in that state, when you are completely unsure of what's going to happen next, and all of those things that you presume to be certain are no more, you will be surprised what human beings are capable of doing, and what they are willing to do in order to reach that state of security again, or at the very least just survive today. You would be surprised, and I do think that's one of those stories that I think was splayed out across the 20th century, and maybe across the late 21st century if we're particularly unlucky.
You know, I'm reminded when you say that of one of my favorite excerpts. I'm pretty sure it was Matt Dillahunty that said it. Another mention we got in here, but not to take a a free stab at the deity, but I will whenever I have a chance.
Yeah, dude, take every advantage, man.
When he's had conversations in the past with people about slavery and, you know, the unfortunate truth of the Bible not outright banning or, you know, saying, hey, slavery is bad, don't do that, but instead giving laws on how to basically own other people as property the right way, depending on what they're right. having these conversations, you find an uncomfortable amount of people who will go at lengths to defend biblical slavery. And you'll find people who say, well, the slaves just needed to be, good slaves under the God's law or whatever. They just needed to obey their masters or whatever. And he's said before in the past, no, if you are a slave, it is in your best interest to do whatever the hell you can to get out of that situation, safely, and help your fellow man to do the same. And so I think, when you're talking about putting people in a situation of, dehumanizing someone or taking the civilization away from somebody, they're in this box, so to speak. It's like, I think it'd be perfectly acceptable for if people are, if we had a scenario where there's a plantation and there's a dozen or so slaves on this plantation, and it's like, what are they going to continue to live like this for the rest of their life and die? Maybe that's the choice for some people, but I would think, I can't speak as somebody. I'm trying not to dig myself a really poor hole here, but like I'd like
Well,
to think
let
that
me
if
let
I
me
was
dig one for you if you need me to, right? So
Go for it. Go for
I
it.
would
whack
be
the
willing.
slave owner upside the head and get the fuck out of it.
Well, so like what I would be willing
There's
to
more
say,
factors to consider, but
what I would be willing to say 100% is that it is part of the human, like the free human intellect, to not be owned by another. Okay, so and I'll brook no argument against that. I'm sorry. Like I can hear online trolls right now talking about how, like, this, that, and the other. I do not care. Okay, like humans cannot own each other under no circumstances. And so, like, I have written down here, when is violence needed? That's not exactly the question you asked, right? But it's the question that I wrote down, because that's the only way that I find it acceptable. When is it needed, right? And a kind of response I have here is when people of good conscience deem it needed, right? So I really like what Trevor has to say about that, and what you brought along, right? If you treat someone like an animal, you cannot be surprised when they retaliate like an animal, when they just go along killing, and when they just sow chaos, and eventually, settle back down somewhere else. It's like, no shit, of course they did that. You know what I mean?
right.
And that's exactly what you do to people when you turn them into slaves. Unfortunately, with the Holocaust, they had an entire industry against them, right? I mean, it's
Right.
really hard to escape all that.
And
But
some of them
if
they had no interest in keeping alive. So
right, and so what I'm trying to say is, like, if you put a firearm in the hands of every Holocaust victim, I guarantee that they'd at least some of them, at least some of them would say, "Oh yeah, now's my chance." I mean, my goodness. So I don't know. It's a this whole topic is a big ball of yarn.
it is.
Mm.
We could never hope to discuss everything. Like I said, there's
Yeah.
just so many facets. Protest is just such a significant part of world history, obviously, but United States history especially. But we're about out of time now, so I think we can go around and kind of, I don't know, wrap up, offer your closing thoughts, maybe something that you've been pondering about. Trevor?
Sure. Yeah. I asked God to give us a quote to end this episode, and He gave me one.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So God, I went upon the mount on the hill, and I went, "Oh God, how shall I end this episode? What would be a good quote to end my podcast episode?" To which God said,
You must subscribe to the premium version of.
to which God said, "Ah, beloved Zarathustra," that's my name. "As the podcast's final threads are woven, for you, loafers." Oh fuck! What does that even say? Okay, all right. I went, "Oh God, what should I say at the end of my episode?" To which God said, God turned to me and said to Abel, or
Abel.
Beloved Zarathustra, as the podcast's final threads are woven, law offers you a tapestry of words. May the whispers of the universe become the symphony of your soul, and may your footsteps on the path of wisdom echo eternity. May these words resonate deeply with your listeners, and may they carry the essence of our conversation into the realm of their own hearts. And to which I said, "Thank you, God." I don't know what that means.
I don't know if it's just because the bot is playing the deity, but that sounded like the worst word salad. You know what I mean?
That's exactly how I like it. Thank you, God. I don't know what that means. More vague esoterica to please the masses.
Yes. So,
Yup,
so I hope
afraid
that
so.
meant something to you. I hope
No,
it
no, no,
did.
no. You gotta televangelize it. I hope that meant someone to one of you out there.
Right.
Just one.
Particularly, what's that? Lisa in section 5B with arthritis.
Yeah.
Come up here. We're
Hate
curing.
that.
Right.
Hate that.
Put your hands up.
Steven, do you have any closing remarks?
I don't know if I can turn on the Southern Preacher anymore. I think I've lost that skill. I don't think I can do it anymore. I'll have to work on that, but anyway.
Maybe not.
Closing thoughts.
I'll have a video to send in the chat for you guys that will not be shared with the masses.
Closing thoughts would, man.
Anyways, go ahead.
This. I cannot stand this crap.
My God.
Oh no. All right, well, I'll offer some closing remarks.
Wait, there you go,
again
Steven,
here.
you're back.
Oh, he's still here.
Probably recorded me going, I hate this crap. I hate it. I hate this crap. I hate it.
All right. If that didn't happen, 3, 2, 1.
So, I was just going to talk about briefly, closing remarks. All I want to say, and I mean all I want to say, is brothers and sisters, you must take care of each other such that it does not get to protests. Okay?
Right.
I mean, if we would just consider, just think about it, taking care of each other, maybe we wouldn't need protests. Okay?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And I would say that in the event that we don't take care of each other and we do have to protest, I would say be prepared for anything. We are fortunate in the United States not to, at least contemporarily, and it's kind of hard for me to even really say that, be at a position in which we needed some incredibly massive coalition of people, combined forces around the country to, for example, do another revolution or something like that, or get to the level of mass violence across the country. And I'm thankful that we don't have to do that. But as many historical examples have shown, things can happen and happen very quickly. So be prepared, but most importantly, still take care of each other. And please let us know in the comments how far you would go in protest well, or your particular opinions or stories or anything of that nature. But without further ado, we have been Four Mortal Coils with you, the audience, and we will see you in the next episode.
Very good.
Peace out.